This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because, well, it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's January 13th, and on this day in 1991, Bo Jackson's football career came to a sudden end. This was a divisional playoff game between the Los Angeles Raiders and the Cincinnati Bengals. The third quarter had just started, and the Raiders were up 7-3. They'd gotten the ball to start the second half. It was second down and 10, and calling the action that day for NBC were Dick Enberg and Bill Walsh.
And the team just continued to function. And fortunately, in a sense, they didn't have to have him playing great football because a lot of other people were.
Bo Jackson has some room. One man to beat, and from behind, Kevin Walker saves another touchdown.
Jackson gained 34 yards before Bengals linebacker Kevin Walker grabbed Jackson's right leg and made the tackle. Now, nothing looked out of the ordinary. Jackson was able to get to his feet, and then he was in some obvious pain and he went back down to the ground. After trainers came onto the field, he was helped back to his feet and he limped across the field to the Raiders sideline. Nobody knew it at that moment, but that would be the last time that Bo Jackson would be in uniform on a football field. It turned out to be a dislocated hip, but it would get much worse. It took about a month to discover, but he had suffered avascular necrosis, which in essence is the blood flow to the bone tissue of the hip was cut off and the tissue died. His football career was over, right at the point where it looked like he was headed for the stratosphere. Numbers don't tell the full story, but playing a limited schedule in his 4 seasons, he averaged about 5.5 yards a carry. In 3 of his 4 seasons, he had the league's longest touchdown run. Of course, Bo was a 2-sport star. He was released by the Kansas City Royals soon after, and it looked like his baseball career would end as well. But he did sign with the Chicago White Sox in 1991. He only played in 23 games. He had 71 at-bats with 3 homers and 14 RBI. He had hip replacement surgery and he missed the entire 1992 baseball season before making a comeback with the White Sox in '93. After hitting .232 with 16 homers, he was named Comeback Player of the Year, but everybody could see that he just wasn't the same. He spent a year with the California Angels in '94 before retiring from baseball. On this day in 1999, Michael Jordan retired for the second time in 5 years. NBA players had been locked out while collective bargaining was happening. When the CBA was accepted on the 6th, and then with the end of the lockout coming in a few days, Jordan decided that this was the day to announce that he was retiring. But in essence, the decision had been made many months earlier, when it had become clear that Phil Jackson was not coming back to coach after winning the NBA championship in June. With the near impossibility of the Bulls re-signing Scottie Pippen or Dennis Rodman, it was going to be a complete rebuild with the Chicago Bulls, and Jordan wanted no part of that. He held a deep grudge against GM Jerry Krause, and that was known, but it was very obvious throughout the press conference that day. In his opening statement, when he was praising those with the franchise for building a team that had won 6 NBA titles, he casually but deliberately left out Jerry Krause's name.
I think everyone has their own reasoning. There's been a lot of speculations in terms of why I'm pretty sure I get to that point once you guys get the opportunity to ask questions. But I want to say thank you to both of the gentlemen here, Mr. Stern and Mr. Reinsdorf, for presenting me with the opportunity to play the game of basketball, and certainly giving me an opportunity to come to Chicago and meet my beautiful wife and build a family here, and my family in North Carolina, a lot of my friends who have come up to support this day and support me, who have always supported me once I stepped on the basketball court and even when I didn't play on the basketball court.
So the guy who was introduced to the world with the game-winning shot against Georgetown in the 1982 NCAA championship game.
Shot, Jordan, Michael Jordan.
That was bookended 16 years later with the game-winning shot against the Utah Jazz in Game 6 of the NBA Finals.
Jordan, open, Chicago with the lead.
Michael Jordan went out on top, only to come back to the game a year later as part owner and team president of the Washington Wizards. And of course, he would put the uniform on once again in September of 2001. On this day in 1968, tragedy struck in the NHL. The Minnesota North Stars were playing at home against the Oakland Seals. North Stars center Bill Masterton skated into the offensive zone, and he was met by two Seals defenders. As Masterton passed to the wing, he was tripped up, and then as he was falling forward, one of the defenders caught him with a legal clean check, sending Masterton backward. The back of his head hit the ice with the sound that a teammate would later describe as like that of a baseball bat hitting a ball. Masterton was not wearing a helmet. In fact, very few hockey players wore one at that point. He was knocked out and lying motionless on the ice. He was carried off on a stretcher and quickly taken to the hospital. But the swelling of his brain was so severe that doctors could do very little. He never regained consciousness. His wife, Carol, was at the game that night, and his parents were listening to the radio broadcast. And they had to make the heart-wrenching decision to remove Bill from life support in the early morning hours of the 15th. An autopsy revealed additional damage done to the left temple area of his brain from a hit taken within days of his fatal injury, and his death was due to second impact syndrome. The night before Masterton's devastating injury, he had attended a party with teammates and he had complained of having migraine headaches. But knowledge of concussions was nearly non-existent at this point, and the NHL code of that day, and even to a good extent to this day, is you play hurt. So, did this lead directly to players wearing helmets? Well, the NHL All-Star Game was played the day after Masterton died, and players talked about helmets, which was a controversial topic to bring up, but it was considered a sign of weakness if you wore one. But no real mandate was put in place until June 1st, 1979, more than 11 years after Masterton's death, when the league instituted that any new player coming into the league had to wear a helmet while on the ice. Those who were in the league prior to that date could choose to wear one or not. Following Masterton's death, the league's writers proposed and the league adopted the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy, given each year to the player who is an example of perseverance, courage, and sportsmanship. The unfortunate part of that is it goes back to what happened on this day in 1968. Also on this day in 1974, the Miami Dolphins beat the Minnesota Vikings 24-7 to win Super Bowl VIII. Dolphins running back Larry Zonka ran the ball 33 times for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Quarterback Bob Greasy only threw 7 passes on the day and completed 6 of them for 73 yards. It was the Dolphins' 3rd straight appearance in the Super Bowl and their 2nd win. Interesting fun fact about this one: this was the last NFL game where the ball had stripes. The NFL had allowed stripes on the football for night games, but after this one, the stripes were removed from the NFL ball. And in 2009, the Covenant Girls basketball team from Dallas beat the Dallas Academy Girls 100-0. Controversy followed, with parents in attendance complaining that Covenant was shooting threes in the 4th quarter, and they were being encouraged by Coach Micah Grimes as they got closer to 100. Covenant school officials issued a statement apologizing for their team and the coach's actions, eventually leading to the firing of Covenant's head coach, who was unapologetic in a social media post following a public outcry. Grimes wrote, "I do not agree with the apology or the notion that the Covenant School girls basketball team should feel embarrassed or ashamed. We played the game as it was meant to be played." And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. On this date back in 1981, a British woman named Donna Griffiths began sneezing. From that point, she sneezed uncontrollably until September 16th, 1983.
Say what?
That's 976 days.
What?
And she is the unfortunate record holder for consecutive days sneezing. Hey, this is Steve White, the host of This Day in Sports History. I appreciate you taking some time to listen to today's episode, and if you've gotten this far at the end of each episode or a couple of episodes over the last month, then you know I've been talking about making the short list for the best sports talk podcast in 2024. Well, the voting closes on the 13th, so if you haven't voted yet, and you wouldn't mind helping me out a little bit, now's the time to make your voice heard. I've put a link in the show notes that will take you right to the page. It'll take about 30 seconds, and if you do that, I'd appreciate it. Thanks. Have a great day. I'll talk to you tomorrow. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fans. We've got some exciting news to share with you. 6 of our podcasts from the Sports History Network have made it to the final round of voting for the prestigious Sports Podcast Awards. Here are their shows and the categories. Historically Speaking Sports and This Day in Sports History are both competing for Best Sports Talk Podcast. No Nonsense Old School Weightlifting History is in the running for Best Fitness, Health, and Wellbeing Podcast. When Football Was Football is up for Best Sports Documentary Podcast. Wrestling with Heels On has entered the ring for Best Wrestling Podcast. And Shoulder Roll Virtual Boxing is fighting for the title for Best Combat Sports Podcast. Now, of course, we need your help to take home the championship for each of these awesome shows. All you gotta do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/vote. Cast your vote for your favorite shows, or better yet, all 6 of them. Again, every vote counts, and we got to show the world how much sports history really matters. So thank you for your support and making Sports History Network the headquarters for sports yesteryear. But again, don't wait. You got to go vote now. That's over at sportshistorynetwork.com/vote.